Hi everybody, welcome. I am trying out a new space here, so just forgive me for the lighting. Let's see if I can get this right. Uh, Sorry about that. Okay, hopefully this will work, and I am looking forward. Give me 1 second here while I just adjust myself for a second. Some weird halo going on around my head, but all good. I am really looking forward to having Chavie Bruk come on this evening. She has been extremely outspoken about her infertility journey, and she actually did a collaboration, a takeover with Bonei Olam Chabad a few months ago, and spoke all about her infertility journey. I'm going to ask her when she comes on here. I'm going to ask her also to just share a little bit about that, to bring everybody up to speed for those of you who don't know her. But then we're going to spend this hour and we're going to talk about her adoption journey. She has 5 beautiful children, all of whom came into her family through adoption. I see she just joined, so she'll be with us in a minute. And this page is devoted to anyone who's struggling to have a family, and however they end up having a family or don't have a family. This is a space for everyone to feel, a space for everyone and anyone to talk about their journey. And so I'm thrilled to have Chavie here. She's just connecting, and here we are.
Hello.
Hi Chavie, how are you?
Baruch Hashem. Could you see me okay? I'm going to close the shades in the back.
Yeah, I can see you perfectly. I was gonna say you're having you're having the same glare that I'm having, but you're good actually.
Okay.
Good. You're good. You're perfect.
Okay.
You're perfect. Welcome. I'm
Thank
so
you.
thrilled to have you here, and I know there were so many messages that I got that people were super excited also about having you here and having you share. Let's just launch right into it. First of all, please please share with us. Obviously many people do know about your infertility journey, but just to sort of set the stage for talking about your children and that piece of your life, I'd love for you to just, give a little bit of a background as to why, the beginning part of this, why we're here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I got married about, it's hard to believe, over 14 years ago. And obviously, planned to start a family after we got married pretty quickly, as is tradition in the Orthodox world. And you don't think about the fact that maybe things aren't going to happen as you expect. And you just, as like a young, you know, 21-year-old, you don't think about it. It's just like, okay, this is what I want my life to be. This is what I planned on happening, and this is what's going to happen. But pretty soon we realized that that's not what was happening. And in the beginning, we really just started just taking the tests and going to the doctors and starting to explore a little. And then right in the middle, we moved to Montana on our first anniversary. So right in the middle, we kind of left New York and Texas, where I had some connections with doctors as well, and moved to basically a state. Like the whole state had no fertility specialists. So that kind of set us back a little bit, not by much, because we moved without having children. So we had more flexibility, and we traveled to continue our fertility treatment. And I feel like my journey is a little bit unique because, basically 2 years in, at 23 years old, we got like a permanent infertility diagnosis. So, on the one hand, it's always like everything has its ups and downs and its pros and cons. But in the one hand, I so feel that up and down of having hope and going through tests and it failing and whatever, like that is so big. I'm almost a little bit grateful that I was like just thrown into this, and there was like nothing to try. And so many people would keep on, oh, there's this new doctor, try this and try that, and oh, this. And my husband and I always looked at each other, and we're just like, we smiled, but we're like, okay, great. And we always sent our medical records because you never know, right? Yep. But every single time till today, they're like, oh, you did that? Sorry, we can't help you. Like we really took it to the end. And because it was so fast, like it was, we were on like the trajectory so quickly that, it was a little shocking to have I was 23, my husband was 26, to just have your life completely, just like turned on its head, like there's nothing to do. And we had to come to terms with this fact. And, we just, that was like full stop. Like there wasn't nothing, like, so it definitely was a little traumatizing.
Yeah. I love the way you said that, and that, for so many people, infertility is a journey that goes on and on and on and on and lasts for years and years and years and years. And they keep trying the next thing and the next thing and the next doctor and the next doctor. And there's this piece where people feel that like if we just got to that right person or that right diagnosis or that right medicine, like this could all be solved. And so there's this constant chasing, and the uncertainty of not knowing what if. And for you, I love the way you said that, like you ran out of options, and so therefore there was that like full stop, and so then you had to take that right turn or the left turn or however you describe it.
And it sounds funny sometimes for people to hear this, but like I wouldn't change it. Like if I'm already on this journey, like, there's always, we all take, if we put all our challenges in the middle, we'd all take our own challenges back because God knows what he's doing, but I wouldn't change that, because I think in some ways having that like hard no, like, allowed me to move on, right? Because it wasn't like I wasn't giving it a full chance or I wasn't doing my all. It was like full stop. And the other thing that I had to do was, because we are built with so much faith and so much trust in God. And sometimes we feel like, oh, like if we have faith in God and trust in God, he's going to provide us a miracle for what I think I deserve, right? And so I was still held on to this little piece of me, was like, maybe I'll have a miracle. Maybe I'll have a miracle. And like crazily enough, like I would think like, oh my gosh, maybe this month, like I just by miraculously got pregnant, and I would take pregnancy tests like a cuckoo, and I was disappointed. I'm like, well, what am I doing to myself? I did that for years. And then one day I finally said to my husband, I said, you know what? If Hashem wants to do a miracle, he's going to do it. And it's going to have nothing to do with me. I need to let go. I need to let go of this like obscure thought that maybe there's going to be one day a miracle, and completely just dismiss that idea because it was messing with my head. And as much as I could move on, and this even happened after I adopted, as much as I like, had moved on and had embraced my life, like there was still this little piece of me that was just like, maybe there's going to be a miracle. And that doesn't, it helps that like people always say that to you, like, oh my gosh, you know how many times I've heard this story, like, oh, my friend adopted, and after she adopted, she had biological children. And I was like, okay, first of all, that's obviously not happening. And second of all, I'm like, I don't want my adoptions to be a means to an end. That is not how I want to bring my kids into this world. Like, oh, I'm going to adopt you, hopefully, because then maybe I'll have a biological child. Yep. Like my adoptions are because I'm fully committed to my path in my life. And I believe that this is my purpose, not for hoping something else is going to happen.
Amazing. I think that's like, it's 1,000% like the right way to look at it. And, but you're right that, those of us in the Orthodox community, we constantly hear these stories, like these stories of these miracles, these nisim that happen to people over and over again. And so, and we all know, because we've also heard, it's not only these stories, like a lot of these stories have also happened to people that we know personally. So we know that God can do
They're true, they're real, they happen.
Correct. They 100% happen. And so we know that God can do anything. He can take someone who has terminal cancer and immediately cure them. We know he can take someone who supposedly is completely infertile and he can make them have a baby. We know all of that to be true.
Yeah.
But yet it doesn't mean that you should just keep on hoping and hoping and hoping and put away the work that you need to do to make your life a reality in the meantime.
100%. I also, people know about me. I'm like, I don't want to hear miracle stories. It's not productive for me. So I should be like, oh my gosh, why did they get a miracle and I don't? You know, like I don't relate to them. I don't get inspired by them. It's a trigger for me. So I just don't seek them, you know? And to me also, I view through time, this didn't happen right away, but I view my adoptions as my miracles, because if you know what it means to adopt and what it takes and all the pieces to come together, those are my miracles, right? And I'm not going to search and look for or wish for a different miracle.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, okay. So let's sort of get into it. So,
Sure.
Okay, you had this sort of mindset shift where, you know, you stopped thinking that, you know, something was going to happen, that God was going to give you a miracle. And then, okay, so then what?
So we got this infertility diagnosis, and obviously, like, it was a shock, and we were really young. Like, I look back, I'm like 23. Like, I was a baby, you know, like I had no idea what hit me. And in a way, I feel like that kind of made it easier. Like, I was naive. I didn't really understand what was in store. And I just I was thrown into this position that I had to come to terms with. And so we did take time, you know, a little bit of time to process, which 14 years later, I still am processing that, right? I'm still processing that. Like, only through therapy and through working really hard on being in touch with my emotions that I realized that I never actually properly grieved. I'm so action oriented, and I'm so like, well, if I can't have kids this way, then what practically am I going to do? Because I'm not like a wallower and I'm like oh my goodness, and just stay in this zone. I don't know how to do that. So I was like, okay, what's next? And that has a lot of advantages, but also, you know, there's some stuff that get left out in that process. And I'm still learning that, you know, grief is an ongoing process. And, you know, most of the time I'm good, but then I have, you know, when you have lots of sisters and sister-in-laws and they're always getting pregnant, and, you know, when I embrace and love my path and my children and everything that I have in my life. And at the same time, as a woman, we desire to carry a child, right? And to give birth, and it's on our hormones, you know, like that's how Hashem created us.
Right.
So I used to feel guilty about that. I'm like, why do I even want that anymore? I have children. Like, why am I still jealous of all these people who are having babies naturally? And because it's not an if and or, right? It's just like, this is how Hashem created us for a reason. He created us to want to procreate. And as much as I have my beautiful, wonderful family, I never got to do that physically. So I forgot where I was going with that.
No, I mean, that's a real piece of this. And yeah. You know, I hear that also a lot from women who have hysterectomies or other medical conditions who can't have any children or another child after they have one or two or however many already. Sure. That there's a deep pain and grief that they feel because they can't continue to do or can't do at all what their bodies were created to do.
Yeah. And so I used to beat up myself. I'm like, I used to feel guilty about that. And then finally, like, through a lot of work, I'm like, you know what? It doesn't contradict the fact that I love my family with the fact that I still have to grieve and stay present with my feelings when something hurts, you know? And so I was going with because we moved on, and I grieved somewhat, but like was very action oriented at that point. And I think, you know, Hashem always knows what he's doing. I needed that drive to like pick myself and get going, because if I would have gone too deep, I probably wouldn't have been able to come out, you know? So at that time I was like, okay, let's practical. And so we decided pretty quickly that, you know, with my husband and figuring out like halachically, like the different options and understanding what each kind of option entails, and, you know, figuring out like what both my husband and I are okay with doing, and we settled on adoption. And once we decided that, it was very exciting, but then what, right? Because in the Orthodox world, it just wasn't very common, and definitely not talked about, and definitely not done out in the open. And so we really had to figure it out from bottoms up. Like, we had no guidance, no one to talk to, no one to call. And we just had to really just like figure it out from the bottoms up. And so, you know, it was a long process it feels like a long process from when we started the process till we actually had adopted our first child was almost 2 years.
And so who were some of these people? I mean, knowing that, you know, you were really sort of working from the bottom up, like, who were some of the people or organizations that you did reach out to try to give you a hand?
Okay, so Bonei Olam, we worked with Bonei Olam through all our infertility journey, our short infertility journey, but they were amazing and wonderful and supportive. And they were supportive through the adoption process. They didn't know, that's not their thing, so they didn't know tons about it, but they were always like a good listening ear and supportive. And interestingly enough, San Antonio, where I grew up, happens to be a really common place for people to adopt because the adoption laws are really, really great. And so my father had a contact with somebody who was in that world. And so we called him, and we kind of got the like little bit of the lay of the land. And we figured out what was so important. We figured out what did we need to do first. And what we needed to do first was get a home study. Because without a home study, something can come up and you can have an opportunity, but then you're not legal to adopt, and then there's nothing to do. And it's about a 6-month process, or maybe even a little less, depending on where you live. And so we needed to get that out of the way. So if something were to come up, we were good to go. So we started, and it gave us something actionable to do. So we started with that. We used Catholic Social Services in Montana to use that service. They actually do facilitate adoptions, but only for Catholic families. So we weren't able to go through an adoption with them, but we're able to use them for their social workers and for all the paperwork and all the legal stuff and all the home visits. And so we got that done. Fingerprints. I mean, it's amazing what you have to go through to become an adoptive parent. I'm like, you know what? If every parent had to do this, maybe this, you know, be a better world.
Right. They always say, like, you know, you need, you know, a whole driver's license, a permit, and, you know, like, study and test and blah, blah, blah to drive a car. And, you know, you have no course whatsoever to be a parent. So yeah.
100%. And they would even ask you, like, we're like parents who've never parented. They're like, well, what's going to be your discipline style? And what's, you know, and like, wow. All these questions and all these books we had to read. And honestly, like, when I look back at it, I'm like, we actually could have used more, you know, like, especially if you're going on the path of adoption, like, you don't get prepared, you know, as is giving birth. Like, you think you grew up in a family of kids, and all of a sudden you have your own child and you're like, what?
Totally.
So we did this actionable thing, and we were prepared. So now we knew that if something would come our way, we'd be ready to go, not scrambling to do that.
And because you had this contact, like a lot of people that I've discussed adoption with and had conversations with about, have, like, they talk about domestic adoptions versus international adoptions. I'm guessing, I mean, I'm now putting words in your mouth, but I'm guessing because your father had this contact in San Antonio, that you didn't look at international adoptions. You were only looking at US based, or?
We actually did everything, you know. This contact was great just to get us going. And he helped us with, like, kind of the intricacies and, like, the protocols and the etiquette, right, of adoption. But we actually really did look into everything. It happens to be that international adoptions nowadays are so much more complicated than they used to be. And when we were in the beginning, especially, like, it was almost like it was impossible. Like, you would have to wait like 5 years to get a baby from China or from, and Russia only let you adopt, like, once the kids were 7 and were really severely disabled. And so, and they weren't, and then soon after that, they shut down Russian American adoptions for political reasons. And so we did put feelers out everywhere, but we just to see what came first. It turns out that our first adoption, my first daughter, not my oldest, but my first daughter, happens to be from Russia, but she wasn't an international adoption because she was born a preemie 9 weeks early. She was 3 pounds. She was very, very, very sick. She had like, she was on a respirator, and she had tons of surgeries, and she was really needed some more medical care. And so miraculously, she came to America, and then we adopted her. Even though she's from Russia, it was still considered a domestic adoption.
Wow.
So what we did after the home study was we have this amazing network, right? Being Jewish, you have family wherever you are. And then you narrow that field to being Orthodox. And then you narrow that field to being Lubavitcher. And you narrow that field to being Shluchim. You have a built-in family, and who are all over the world. So we put it out there. We said, listen, like, this is what we're doing. This is what we're looking for. If any situation arises within your greater community, your community, that this is applicable, please let us know. Wow. And that's literally how we got each one of our children. Like, that's how it happened. But the important part is that we put ourselves out there. Nobody would have known if we didn't say anything. So that was a key piece. Like, yes, this is a personal, private thing, certain details of it, right? But you have to put yourself out there if you want results, right? I always tell them, like, the more you are open to opportunities and put yourself out there, the more you're going to get back, because there's no way anybody would have known or even to entertain the idea if we didn't say something. So as uncomfortable as it was in the beginning, now it's not at all. But in the beginning, as comfortable as it was, and as much as, like, when you say, oh, we're looking to adopt, and then everyone automatically has 5,000 questions, that's what created our family.
Amazing.
So
tell me, I mean, can you give me small snippets about each of the adoptions and sort of how, because I'm sure each of them had their own miracles.
Oh my gosh. We always joke, like, each kid needs their own book. Like, I can tell you, like, very, very briefly. Yeah. But, like, oh my gosh, there's so much to every child. But so our first, one of my husband's closest friends is Yossi Lipsker from Moscow. And there's no other way for this other to then to be a miracle, right? He was actually one of the first people we told, because he's my husband's very close friend. And then the situation happened in Russia, and he ended up coming with this birth mother to the States to help her facilitate medical care and whatever. And then during that trip, she says, she grew up in an orphanage herself. It was an unexpected pregnancy. It was so much. The baby had so many medical needs. And she was like, I really feel like the best thing for this situation is for me to give this baby up for adoption. And, it was there, birth mom's not allowed to adopt until they go through some therapy sessions with a social worker, make sure that they really understand what they're doing. And she did that.
Meaning they're not allowed to give their babies up for adoption. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And then he called my husband. He's like, remember that conversation we had a year ago? Like, are you still interested? And we're like, yes. And there were still so many obstacles and hurdles to go through. But when Chaya was 10 weeks old, the adoption took place in New Jersey, because that's where she was. And I remember like yesterday, she's almost 11. She'll be 11 in August. And it was the adoption agency, and they said, you can come now and get your baby. And it was like,
I have chills.
It was like, oh my gosh. And then we went to the adoption agency and we picked up Chaya. And the crazy thing is that people always ask me, like, oh my gosh, like, was it so weird to all of a sudden become a mom? And I look back at it and I'm like, it felt like, I don't know what it feels like to give birth, but if I imagine what it feels like to give birth, where all of a sudden you hold your baby and you're a mom, right? That's what it felt like. It was like, and then everything else just disappeared, And it was just like, oh, we understand. Like, we understand the plan. Like, this was the plan, And we became parents just like that. Just 10-week old, at 10 weeks old, she was like 7 pounds, like a newborn. But it was so, like, almost spooky, because she was so alert, and she had these big, huge eyes, and she was like, alert, but she looked like a newborn, so it was like a little disconcerting. You know, it's like this tiny thing like staring at you. But yeah, it was amazing, and we just slid into this role of parenting like seamlessly. Obviously the same ups and downs as a regular parent and whatever, but like it just was natural. It was such a blessing.
Amazing. Amazing. Okay. So
then
that's,
so that
so
was
that's Chaya.
And then so ZC, who's almost 10, she'll be 10 in September. She literally like 3 or 4 months later, after we adopted Chaya, we got a call from a rabbi in New Jersey, and said, "Are you interested in another adoption?" And we're like, "Okay." And we found out pretty early on in the pregnancy, so her due date was in October. So we had just adopted Chaya in November, and her due date was October. We adopted Chaya in November. Remember, she's 10 weeks old. Right. So Chaya and ZC are 13 months apart, but we adopted them 10 months apart. And so obviously there has to be drama. So ZC was born 3 weeks early, and we were still pretty new to our shluchas in Montana, so we would go to Texas for Simchas Torah. And she was born on the first day of a 3-day yontif on Simchas Torah, and we weren't anywhere near her. Right. And it was so stressful because we got a fax from our lawyer that said she's born, it's a girl, 5 pounds, whatever. And the hospital is saying that if you don't come within 72 hours, we're giving the baby to social workers. And we're like, what are we supposed to do? But we are not there, and it's a 3-day yontif. Like, so.
Right. So just to explain, just for the people who are watching who are not Orthodox and don't understand. Yeah. So during certain Jewish holidays during the year, there, just like the Sabbath, there are lots of things that you can't do. You can't use electricity, you can't drive, you can't get on an airplane, you can't do 1,000 things. So in the beginning of a 3-day holiday, and the reason it normally is not 3 days, these holidays are normally sort of 2 days. There are two days, 2 days plus, I should say. But if they're right next to Shabbos, the Sabbath, then those holidays become 3 days. Meaning, so if a holiday starts on a Thursday, so it would be Thursday, Friday, but then the next day is Shabbos, the Sabbath, so then it would be a 3-day holiday. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, thank you for explaining. And so we were a nervous wreck because here we are. We've been on this journey with this particular child who you already think is yours, and you know, and it's just like,
and you're nowhere near New Jersey.
We're nowhere near New Jersey. We have our hands are tied. Right. So you get creative in these situations. And to make a long story short, we had someone in our show who wasn't Jewish, who was able to call my mother-in-law, who was very sick then, who had an aide. So we called the house. They still had, thank God, answer machine that played out loud. So we were able to say, like, please have the aide pick up the phone. It's an emergency. We need to. And so what ended up happening was my sister-in-law and brother-in-law, my husband's sister and brother, basically, we were able to give them over, like we gave consent for them to pick up ZC. They were in Crown Heights, and they had like a deadline. They had like 2 hours after Yontif. If they weren't there, the hospital was like, they didn't care. Like, if you are not here by this time, that's it. So literally the second after Yontif, the holiday, they rushed to New Jersey, which is like an hour and a half away. They picked up ZC. They spent the night in a hotel with this newborn baby. And we flew early the next morning. We met our daughter ZC in Enterprise Rent-A-Car. Literally. They're like, we land, we go to the rent-a-car, and my sister-in-law's like, hey, here's your baby. And it's so surreal. Like, when does that happen? Like, who does that happen to? And then that's it. And all of a sudden we were parents of two, like a 1-year-old and a newborn. And another technical thing with adoption is that there's a lot of legalities. So there's something called interstate, which means your adoption has to legally go through in the state that you're in. So that would be New Jersey. Then they transfer the paperwork to where you live, which is Montana, and they have to accept this adoption. And then you can leave the state. Till then, you are not allowed to leave the state of New Jersey. and that would be considered child trafficking, and then you lose your baby and you get arrested. So so then we're stuck in New Jersey for longer than we wanted, over a week. And nobody's in a rush over at Interstate. Like, they take their time. It's government. They just don't.
Bureaucracy. Yeah, yeah.
And so we're stuck in like a one hotel room with 2 babies. And I remember one of the nights, like, hi, I had an ear infection, and I sent my husband in the middle of the night to the pharmacy to get a thermometer, and it was just like, here I am with 2 babies. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. So that was ZC's drama, and then and then we were able to go home, and we had two babies, and it was beautiful. And then ZC has a whole other story of her health and what developed, and that's a whole nother topic. But she ended up being diagnosed with a rare genetic disorder that only 500 people in the world have. That, it's just like part of the fun. And she has, quite a journey. But we don't have all the time in the world, so we'll save that for next time. Okay.
How is she though? How is she though right
now?
Thank God. I can't hear you say that without asking. It's the pediatrician in me.
Oh yeah, for sure. So thank God she's doing wonderfully. She's on a special diet, and it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable how she's gonna face a lot of adversity and a lot of challenges, and every day is a struggle, but she's doing beautifully, and we have just so much to be thankful for. So thank God. Okay, so Manny's my son, and he we found out about him through another mutual kind of community activist in Crown Heights, and of this situation. And it was 2.5 years, so I was already getting like really antsy and itchy for my next baby.
Meaning that ZC was 2.5 years old.
ZC was 2.5 years old when we adopted Manny. And he was unique because he is biracial, and we knew, right? So this person who told us, like, he has one white parent that's white, one parent that's black, and in that situation, you just don't know, right? Like, there's so many ways that can turn out.
This woman was this was a situation you found out when the woman was pregnant, when the mother was pregnant. Okay.
Pregnant. Also pretty early on in the pregnancy. So there, months to, on the one hand, it's really great to know early. On the other hand, sometimes I'm like, just tell me when they're already born. Like, it's too much for me, because there's so many roller coasters and ups and downs, and they change their mind back and forth. And you're just like, it is this emotional roller coaster that it leaves you breathless. Like, so much. So we knew, like, this might be a possibility. And we had to, like, when there's a biracial couple, a child can be born completely black or white, or they're always going to be biracial, but there's a lot of different ways that could look, and there's no way you can know, right? And so my husband and I had to do a lot of deep soul searching, because we have to be responsible in our choice, because it's not doing any kid or anyone a favor if we said yes to something that we weren't okay with, because Absolutely. The only thing that happens is that nobody gets what they need. So it's better to say no thank you, and say, I don't think I can handle this, even though it might look not okay or you're not strong enough. But in the long run, that's the stronger thing to do, is to be really open with your boundaries and what you can handle and what you can't.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And for me, like, I pretty much would do anything, which is why my husband balances me out. But it took some time to just come together. And also, you got to be a team, right? Like, like, I can't be okay with something and my husband not, or vice versa, and we have to be able to parent together and be on the same page with this huge, immense responsibility. So we took some time and really thought about it, and we said, we don't know exactly how this is going to turn out. We don't know exactly what this is going to look like, as is for our other children, for that matter. But we're in. Right. We're in. So he was born.
This situation would affect all of you as a family, not just the two of you.
All of us. And it also, like, we also really thought about the fact that even if, let's say, it's fine for us, how's he going to feel? Like, being in a white family, living in Bozeman, being in a Chabad family, and you know what I'm saying, like we have to take that into consideration too. And we came to the conclusion that it's all going to be about our perspective and how we parent and how we, you know, present things and how we talk about things and how open we are, like, and then hopefully providing confidence and, you know, self-respect. And just but it takes a conscious effort to, you have to be really present and understand what you need to do, you know, and
Absolutely.
be ready for that. So he was born April 14th, right after Passover. And he's amazing. I cannot imagine life without him. And he's Black, and he adds so much to our life, and has allowed our family to be so experience so many unique things that other families don't get to. And and that doesn't make me feel different or weird or less than. It makes me feel privileged that we get to have this experience that most people don't. And I consider myself almost like, hopefully I can fill these shoes. Like, this is a big responsibility, and maybe sometimes I'm not doing a good enough job, but it's just amazing, because I really feel like I said before, like the more opportunities we open ourselves up to, the more you receive. And I feel really strongly about that.
Look, I think that, you know, there's so much to say about, you know, raising a child who's biracial in a white family, in a white community. You were speaking about Bozeman, and somebody asked about it. Bozeman, I'm guessing, is the community in which you live in Montana.
Montana, yeah, the city.
And look, that I think is, you know, we could spend a whole other hour talking about those pieces. But I think, you know, it's a real testament to you and your husband and your family to recognize what all of the different, to try to recognize what the different pieces would be for your lives at that moment, and then what also would be for your lives in the future, and the lives of your current children and potentially your future children, and how, whether you were willing to handle that and could handle that. And I think I love what you said. And this woman, Mighty Mama Malka, I'm wondering if she's some of these people, I'm guessing, are people that know you or people that are
Totally
related to you. But I love what she said here, which is just exactly what you just said, which is the more opportunities you open yourself up to, the more you receive. And that's, you know, there was someone also who commented even before saying, like, she could never adopt. Even hearing these stories and hearing how beautiful, you know, the way you discuss each of these children, and how, you know, the way that they came into your lives, and the miracles and the family that you have been able to create. Thank God. I mean, it takes a certain kind of person and a certain kind of family to be able to do this.
And I think that's really admirable and strong of that person to say, hey, like, I hear your story and it's awesome, but that's not for me. That takes courage to be able to say that and know who you are and know what is right and wrong for you, because there's no cookie cutter, like, this is the, people ask me, so do you think everybody is ready for adoption or could adopt? And I said, yes and no. It's an opportunity for everybody, but anyone could do it if they want to, but you have to connect with it. You have to want to, because this is something that is a really life-changing thing. And I can go on and on about the beauties of adoption and the hardships of adoption. And, you know, it's not something that everybody relates to, and that's okay, you know, and that's okay. And so, yes, is the opportunity available for everybody? Absolutely. But it doesn't mean it's the right thing for everybody. And I don't get, like, personally affronted or insulted when someone says, like, oh, I could never do that. And I'm like, well, good on you to know that, you know?
Right. And also, especially, you know, especially in regard to your son, because that even has an entire different layer, the racial piece of it. And especially, I mean, you and I spoke a little bit about this in our messages to each other, especially in today's day and age. I mean, look, you know, being racially aware and trying to make sure that people are treated treated appropriately, regardless of who they are, is something that we all strive to. And I think one of the things that I also love about the Lubavitch community and your sort of edict of like loving, the Rebbe's edict of really loving everyone, that you take everyone as they are and you bring them in regardless of who they are, where they're from, what they look like, what they're practicing, what they're not practicing. And I imagine that some of it sort of comes naturally from that. But I don't know. I mean,
people, it's
yeah.
amazing that you say that, because people ask us that all the time. They're like, well, how did you come about to doing this and being able to, you know, adopt from all different, you know, races and communities. And my husband and I always say, it's like, we're literally taught to accept everyone for who they are in our communities, in our circles. And why should that not apply to your family? Like, we're just taking that and actually living it and making it applicable, because if we teach it and we preach it, we should be able to do it, you know? And that's how my husband and I decided to live our lives. Now, like I said, doesn't mean it's for everybody, doesn't mean it's the right thing for everybody, but it was the right thing for us. And we feel so blessed that we were able to tap into that and just act on it. And the other thing that always is a question is, oh my gosh, and how do you adopt? And are there all these halachic ramifications, like, you know, Jewish law ramifications, and how do you do it? And I'm like, yes, there are, and it's hard and it's different and you have to adapt. But I'm not going to sit and analyze every what if situation so that I become paralyzed so I don't do anything. I feel like if every mom who gave birth naturally understood exactly what it would be like and try to come up with a solution for every what if, guess what? Nobody would have kids. Correct. Because there's no way to you know, you just got, and I always tell them, like, I this is what I wanted to do, and I didn't know everything that it would entail, but I knew that I was going to take it as it comes and do one step at a time. And, you know, and I'm like, why should I freak out about something that's 10 years down the line? So when it happens, I'll figure it out. And there's ways to figure it out. Yes, is sometimes things different and unusual or uncomfortable or awkward. Yes. But you know what? That's our thing. Everyone has their thing, and that's our thing.
Right. And I also think, like, you know, also when you get pregnant and, you know, God willing, when someone has a baby, you don't know what their life is going to be like. You don't know if they're going to have a medical illness, a psychological illness, they're going to have difficulties in school, trouble making friends, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, you don't know. You just know that you have this baby in front of you. And so, you know, adopting has its own set of different circumstances, but again, it's a child and you just don't know.
Exactly. And it's so powerful just to be able to say, like, and trust me, I like to control things, and I like to know, I like to have a plan. I like to know what's happening, but I'm still in this journey of letting go, because even now, like with my kids, like it's nothing that I expected. Right. And I have all these dreams and wants for my kids, but that's not my job. Like, my job is not to like dictate or figure out what their life is going to look like. My job is to provide for them a safe space to land and figure out their own journeys and to go through life and have the love and support and connection. But I can't dictate for them or figure out for them or protect them, or, you know, I just don't have that ability. So when we start to let go of that, it's a really amazing experience, but we naturally want to hold on. And I find myself doing it all the time. I'm like, but, you know, and I just keep on having to remind myself, this is not, I don't have control over this. Like, I just don't.
Okay. So I want to just bring you back and talk about your last two children, or at least the next two children and their stories. And then there are a couple of questions. We have about 15 or so minutes. There are also I know, no, it always goes by very quickly.
I know. We have the part two.
Right. Okay. So yes, we will do that. But I want to get to the couple of questions first. But I'm sorry. I want to make sure I get to a couple of questions afterwards. But I want to go back to your children first.
Okay, perfect. So after Manny, I want to say, how old was Manny? I want to say 4, he's now 3. So when Manny was about 3, we had a very unique situation where a 12-year-old girl landed in our home for our 2-week summer camp. And we got a phone call about the situation and asked if we have a summer camp that would be able to provide for, her name was Courtney. And we're like, our summer camp doesn't go to age 12, but we can tell this was a need. And we're like, but she can be like a junior counselor, right? Like a junior counselor that's like a camper, but junior counselor. Like, we'll take her under our wing. She'll be a helper and she'll live in our home and hopefully provide for her what she needed. And it was a 2-week thing. And she did. She went home after that. But it became very clear after she went home that her home and living situation was just really not okay. And her mom had died when she was 5, tragically, and her dad, who really does love her, just they people do the best they can, and his best just wasn't cutting it for her, and it just became a situation. And we ended up, long story short, with the opportunity or the situation that this child needed to be adopted. And we were like, a 12-year-old is very, very, very vastly different than a newborn, right? You are adopting a kid that has lived 12 years of their life. And if they're getting adopted, probably most of it was traumatic. And it comes with so much baggage, and you didn't raise them, right? It's a fully grown human being that you are now being responsible for. And my husband and I, I feel like it would have been really normal to say, like, we're just not up for that, right? Like, that's not our thing. But we just really, I'm such a true believer in divine providence. And I was like, why did this child end up at my doorstep? If not because she was meant to be part of our family. Like, I can't ignore that kind of stuff. And so a week or two later, she was in our home as part of our family. And I want to say that the most amazing thing and the most challenging thing we've ever done. You're right. A 12-year-old is a challenging age to begin with, right? 12 is when your child starts to become a self, right? And so they're pushing boundaries and they're figuring out who they are without you. But here we are with this 12-year-old girl who's doing that, but also needs to connect with a new family. So it's push and pull and push and pull, and she had a lot of such a wonderful, amazing, like, rock star of a kid, but with so much baggage and so much things she had to work through. So long story short, like, this was 4 years ago. She's 16 next week, and we've had an incredible journey. And she, through certain realizations and behaviors and knowing that she really needed to work on this trauma and herself, she went to wilderness for 4 months, and then now ended up in a therapeutic boarding academy in Utah, where the focus is equine therapy. She grew up on a ranch, and so that was really wonderful for her to be able to reconnect with animals. And God willing, she's coming home in a couple of weeks, and she's completed this journey. And we hope that, out of our control, right, that this is just a wonderful step to a wonderful, amazing future. But we will deal with whatever need comes up. And that also took a lot of thinking out of the box and understanding, like, it's a very easy to be judged for, how I can't even tell you how many people think or say, like, oh, you're taking the easy way out when you send your kid to a program. And if anyone's ever done it, it is the exact opposite. It feels like, oh, you just can't deal with your kids, so you're sending them away. But it's actually the hardest and most traumatizing thing that you can actually do. And you have to stay strong, even though your kid hates you and thinks that you're the worst, and that this is the best thing for them. And thank God she has had an amazing journey. I think just like everybody's going to have an amazing life journey, is going to have a lot of, struggles and opportunities to grow and opportunities to fall. And the point of this environment was to teach her there's no such thing as, there was no fixing. There was no, like, something broken. It was figure out who you are, what triggers you, what are your stumbling blocks, and develop healthy coping skills to be successful in the future. And so We have, like I said before, what you open yourself up to is what you receive, and we've grown so much as a family. I've grown so much as a parent. Like I look back at before having Shoshana in our lives and before, having to do some really hard stuff. And, it is such a hard journey, but I've developed into a different person that I don't think I would have ever been able to tap into. You tap into certain reserves in these kinds of situations that aren't available to, in a regular day-to-day life.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. I can just, speaking as a parent, I don't talk about my children on this page, but speaking as a parent and watching other parents parent difficult children or kids who have special needs and having to send them away or giving them different therapies that are needed and not necessarily, sort of mainstream, watching my friends parent these children has been, just even watching them and supporting them through that has been some of the most humbling experiences myself that I've gone through. So I call hakavod. I mean, it's look, it's clear that you and I are going to clearly have to have a part 2 to this because there's so much more I want to discuss. But I think one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about the different adoptions was because adopting a baby, as you said, is very different than adopting an older child. And there are so many different layers and pieces that one needs to work through. And it's just remarkable. Absolutely remarkable. Thank you for sharing that. It's to open yourself up and know that, it's a very different experience. Yeah.
It is. And, there's so much of it is very humbling. It's very humbling because when your child goes through a program like this, you're also going through a program and you're also being held to a certain standard and held accountable, and you have to hear a lot of hard stuff and a lot of hurtful stuff, and you have to, grow a little bit of a thicker skin and understand that this is personal, this is a growing and learning opportunity. But sometimes, it's like, I tell my husband, I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. But you allow yourself the good cry, you allow yourself to fall apart, and then you pick yourself back up and you do what you can and you do the best you can. And one of my, and I've said this before on Instagram, but one of my favorite phrases that I've learned and read from Brad Reedy, who's director of the wilderness program that Shoshana went to, is at any given moment, you are doing the best you can and you can do better. And that totally resonated with me because that's exactly what being a mother is like. We're always doing and giving the children the best we can. But in the big scheme of things, there's always more to be done and there's always more we can do. But those live simultaneously. We're doing our best and we can do better. And it just, I feel like, encapsulates the mother journey completely.
Absolutely. And I think it very much encapsulates also the infertility journey, just bringing this back to the beginning of our conversations, where you were talking about how, when you get this diagnosis, you're constantly looking and searching and going and looking and searching and going. And you're always doing enough and you're doing your best, but you feel like you can always
There's always more.
Yeah. Always more. So,
yeah.
Very
so
much.
My therapist told me, she's like, I know you focus on the end of that statement, which is you can do more.
Right.
Focus on the beginning of that statement too, right? Don't forget about the first part of that statement, because I think a lot of us focus on the second part of that statement and we forget that, remember the first part of that statement too. Don't, completely we focus on, we could do better. But remember, we're also doing our best.
Absolutely. Okay. So just to close tonight, tell us, we have about 5 more minutes.
Okay.
Tell us in a short period of time.
Okay.
Tell me about your 5th child.
Okay. So Hanalea is, she's almost 3. She's named after my mother-in-law who passed away. And she was unique in the sense that she was born in Montana. She's in my Montana baby. So that was really special. And she is unbelievably, keeps me on my toes, amazing. She's still a baby, so I'm still enjoying that innocent baby phase where there, no challenges have arisen except she's really, really trouble. But besides, she's like, I can't let her out of my sight for a minute. But, things, special needs or special circumstances usually kind of come out at 3 or 4. So she's still just, I feel like a typical, baby kid who's super fun, and I'm freaking out that she's getting big. I want her to stay little. But yeah, so she actually probably had the least dramatic story, being that we were local, and it was just such a beautiful experience having been at the birth and been with her from the beginning and in Montana. So it's really something that I hold very special to my heart.
Amazing. I mean, this, I feel like I'm going to ask this question and I'm going to regret it because I know it's going to entail a much longer discussion. But I'm wondering if, how many of your children's birth mothers want contact? Are you in contact with, right? Someone just asked, are
any adoptions open? Right. So, yes, each of my children have a different story and plan. And I always say, like, those things are usually dictated by birth mom, right? We actually have to be, we can say yes or no, but she's going to dictate whether what she's comfortable with and what she wants it to look like. So with all my 5 children, it's all different. Each one has a unique experience. And so some, obviously that's private to their personal story, but so I'm not going to say who's who, but some have, like milestone pictures or birthday pictures. Shoshana is old enough to make her own decisions. She has contact with her birth dad when she pleases, and it goes, when she feels like it. It can go months without, and then every day, and that is something that is not our job to dictate or control. Like, that is her choice. We support, we try to provide a healthy environment, like, and healthy expectations of what she should expect out of a relationship like that. But she gets to do that for herself.
Absolutely.
And then I have we have some that I'm in communication with letters and send back pictures, and but not necessarily with the child yet. And just to throw in there, a lot of people ask me, like, what happens when your child wants to find their birth mom or birth dad or family? And I said, it doesn't matter what I feel about it. That's not relevant. The point is that if my child wants to explore where they come from, which is completely understandable, it's my job to support them and facilitate that, regardless of how I may feel about it. And I'm fully on board and happy to do that, because the only thing that can come out of that is support and love, and it doesn't take away my love and the fact that I'm their mother, and doesn't take away my position. Although I had to work through that. It took some time, but that doesn't take anything away from me. It allows my child to maybe find somebody else who will love them. And if that's not the case, I am there to pick up the pieces and support them on however way that journey plays out.
Amazing. Chavie, listen, I mean, I feel like you and I could spend the next, 4 hours and just.
It's always so hard when it's like, you have an hour. And I'm like, but there's so
much. I know. There's so much more to say here, and so much more I want to say. But I want to try to. I feel like if we get into another topic now, it's not going to work. And also, Instagram's going to actually cut us off in another couple of minutes. So I think now this is actually a good time to close. Look. We will do this again. We will set another time in another couple of months.
Amazing.
We will do this again. We'll take questions. But for all the people who are asking, yes, this will be saved. It'll go to IGTV and eventually get to YouTube. I'm still figuring it out. But
good on you for all this technical stuff. I'm
thank you
terrible at it.
So much for being open, for being honest. So I something is happening with the connection here. Oh wait, I think you're coming back. You were a little bit fuzzy for a second.
Sorry.
Are you there, Chavie?
Yes, okay. I'm here.
I think No, you're fine. You're fine. Mine has
here.
actually been me. So I just want to, are, do you mind if people reach out to you with questions, with, comments, etc.? Can people do that?
Absolutely. One of my passions
you.
is to, oh, do you hear me?